Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tate and Dave for another entry in the Steven Spielberg Retrospective, another Indiana Jones film. It's Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Inserts like cheering, hooray, drum roll. Monkeys swinging through trees. Yeah, this is
we'll get
we're
there.
Here for another episode. We'll get there. This is going to be a fun episode, and yeah, we're going to get into it. And I've even forgotten how to do an intro. What I'm going to say, though, there we go. This film is famous for many reasons. It's been parodied many a time. But I will say this, and I'm going to give a lovely shout out to Ed from IndyCast, who couldn't make it tonight, not because of the film. And he did put in his email to me, please say some nice stuff. And I promise, Ed, I will. And he will be joining us for the top 10 video. Again, Australian, UK recording is very difficult. And obviously, we've got a lot of time for Ed, absolute legend. So I'm going to do my best for you tonight. Because this is only the second time I've seen this film, and I'll get into that. But as always, please comment your thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Did you see it at launch? Did you see it years after it came out like me? Have you not ever seen it? Sometimes Martin watched our videos and hasn't seen the films, which I absolutely love. And obviously, this one is 14 years old, and there is a fifth one on the way next year. And I will also add, we're recording this before D23. So there's a very, very, very good chance that there potentially is a teaser trailer out there now. I would guarantee on a poster, guarantee a title reveal, and a little bit more detail. So any mention of Indiana Jones 5 tonight is purely pre-D23 speculation. Can you imagine if there's nothing till after? I'd be so gutted. But at the same time, I'd be like, great. That means there's more for us at Celebration next year. Yes. So as I said, please comment, hit the subscribe button if you're a fan of Steven Spielberg. Of course, this is the place to be. And if you're a fan of Indiana Jones, I'd imagine we do a lot of Indiana Jones stuff nearer the release next year. There's a lot of big films out next summer. And that's going to be one of the biggest ones, so please do get involved. And if you want to find out about some of the videos we do on the channel, what's coming up, what we can't speak about, Tate, I'm going to hand over to you. Where can people find us?
People can find us on Twitter and Instagram. We are very active on those two sites at the moment. You can also find us on Facebook and Letterboxd as well. Just type in Cinema Savvy for those, at cinema_savvy for the Twitter and Instagram. And also, you can find us on Redbubble, where you can get loads of different things, Cinema Savvy. Look at that, displaying a couple of different things, the cap, everything there. Yeah, keep an eye out as well, because there are loads of flash sales happening at the moment. Well, at the moment right now when we're recording this, there are loads of flash sales happening all the time on Redbubble. So you may be able to pick yourself quite a good deal out of there. So
sign up to the newsletter. You get like discounts to use whenever you want. You get good discounts every month or so. And what I would also say,
stickers this week.
No idea. There's always stuff, and there's so many things on there. It's ridiculous. And today's Tuesday, the 20th of September in the future, and the embargo has lifted for Cassian Andor episodes 1 to 4. This is being pre-recorded, so I'm not going to say watch this space. You'll know there may already be a video on the channel. There may not be, but tomorrow there will be a spoiler discussion instead. Or as well as. So, yeah, we don't know what's happening, do we? And that is also one thing to check out. Andor's going to be every Wednesday. Of course, Lucasfilm, like Indiana Jones. So that's going to be very fun. But whilst we've got you on, I don't need to reintroduce you both. You've been on many of these episodes now. Of course, Dave's like the resident, like, safe guy on the channel. You're kind of like one of the main ones of us. You're not, but you should be, and you kind of are at the same time. So I never really know what we call you. We should really do something. But
we call him Dave.
Yes, that's the best way.
Exactly, and you can follow him at the Dave Ryan, and we've got a link to his channel in the description below. We'll go over some other stuff at the end for you, Dave. But I'm going to actually put you on the spot, and this is Tate. I want you to answer it after Dave, but we'll get Dave in the mix. Favorite Indiana Jones film?
Last Crusade.
Get off the video.
Always, yeah. I mean, I love Raiders. Temple of Doom is probably not so much, but yeah. Last Crusade has everything for me. Connery in that movie just takes it to another level. Superb. So yeah, that's definitely my top with Raiders, then Temple of Doom, and then we're going to talk about this one.
For me, Last Crusade, I think, is the best film out of the three. I just like everything about that film. I think it has one of the best film endings of all time, riding off into the sunset. I just think everything about that is just, yeah.
I'm kind of with you both that I will say I have grown to not appreciate Raiders more, because I loved Raiders anyway. It's sort of like the original Star Wars trilogy. There's like, well, certainly for this trilogy, sorry, there's two that are, to me, just up there like that. and you can go either way any day. And when I was younger, I was always surprised when people used to say like Raiders is one of the best films ever made, because I didn't really understand it. And until this year, the discussion with Ed and I sort of there, I think, you know what, I've sort of not underrated Raiders, but I haven't ever appreciated how good the film is. Like, take my enjoyment out of it, the quality of that film. And but I'm the same as you two. If I'm going to pick one to watch Last Crusade, my dad's still not seen any of them, and we've been speaking about it recently. And when this video comes out today, the Indiana Jones 4 Steelbook on 4K will be out, and that would have actually completed my Spielberg collection. So there may be a tweet on my account from yesterday. It's amazing it's had to be the last film to complete the set. I even tracked down a copy of The Terminal from America. But yeah, I think if I show them to him, I'm going to have to do all 4, aren't I? But the 4th one, I might try and put off nearer the time of 5. But, oh, there actually was one. I just didn't tell you about it. But anyway, moving on from that lovely little intro question, what we're going to do, we're going to do the beloved IMDb plot synopsis. And the Indiana Jones one's been a mouthful. For Last Crusade, they put full names, including nicknames, for both Indy and his dad, including Junior and Senior. And they didn't change it for this one. So the IMDb plot synopsis, for anyone that doesn't know anything about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. In 1957, archaeologist and adventurer Dr. Henry Indiana Jones Jr. is called back into action and becomes entangled in a Soviet plot to uncover the secret behind mysterious artifacts known as the Crystal Skulls. That's a mouthful. Again, it's the name. Why do you need to put like his... It's like when Dumbledore comes in the room, doesn't it? It's like Albus, not Severus, that's his son, but it's like his 7-word name. You don't need that, just put Indiana Jones, please. But yeah, and what I'm going to kind of move on to, Tate, I'm going to jump to you first, then Dave. I want both of your memories and history with this film, because I'd imagine everyone's going to have different stories for this, and I'm quite curious actually about it.
So I'd seen all of the Indiana Jones up until that point. I really enjoyed them as a kid, watching the Indiana Jones films. So when they kind of announced there was a new Indiana Jones film coming out, I was like, oh my God. And I think it was the kind of early-ish age of YouTube. And like, it was like, oh, the trailer's on YouTube. I have to go to YouTube and watch a film trailer and stuff like that. So I remember going on there and seeing it and being really excited for the film. It had Shia LaBeouf in it. He was in Holes. I like Holes. So I was like, do you know what? This is going to be a great film. So me and my dad, we both went. We're both fans of it. And we sat down, and we'll say that from the moment which previously was called Jumping the Shark, which was made famous by the Fonz, turning into Nuking the Fridge as a film version of that, before my eyes, I don't think I'll ever forget. I think it was one of the first negative film experiences where I completely understood, wow, this is really not good. This is like a big kind of drop off from the previous stuff that I'd seen, especially because, of course, I binge watched all of the films before going to the cinema and watching it. So I was fully prepared. I was like, oh my God, if they keep it the same, it'll be amazing. And my dad literally turned to me at the aliens moment and just turned to me and just went, this is awful. In the cinema, I just turned to him back and said, yeah, it is. Like, it really is. And yeah, that's my memory of the film right there. That and the, throwing up after the drink along, what was it, last year, 2 years ago? Those are my two memories of the film. Neither of them good.
So this is your third viewing, kind of.
This is, I want to say it's my fourth viewing. I would have seen it one time in between there just to go, really, it wasn't that bad, was it? And I was like, yeah, it was.
I went to the cinema to see it when it came out. It's the same. I was excited to see a new Indiana Jones movie. The trailers sold it to me that it was going to be the next installment, Indiana Jones, but Indy's old, and it's going to be great again. And there are moments that I really do like in the movie. It just kind of gets to there's points even early in the story that I dislike, and then as it gets further in the movie, there's more I dislike than like. But even then, there are little moments that that's Indiana Jones, that's great. But yeah, then I hadn't watched it again until I watched it last night for this review, and again found myself swaying to say, I do actually, that's quite good. Then there are some bits that I just can't even sometimes watch some of these parts. It's so jarring. But yeah, so I've got a very mixed reception on the movie. So some good, some bad. But yeah, not still out of my Indiana Jones movies. It's down there.
That's very interesting. So I've got a very weird history with this. I don't know if I've told you this before, or at least if you were sober. Same view, Dave. But so I watched Indiana Jones for the first time before these films came out. I actually remember it distinctly. I'm a UK folks name, TK Maxx. Back in the day, you'd get great films and toys on like insane prices. And my parents came home with this trilogy. It's at the point I'm starting to get into films more. And it would have been 07. No, 08. It was just before this film came out. It was near Father's Day, so I'll get into that. And I was bought the films, and I watched them, and I loved them. I was like, oh my god, like what am I watching? The Paramount logo's become a mountain. Like, what is this? And I was like, oh my god, it's Harrison Ford. Like I knew nothing. I knew nothing about them. And then you got to Last Crusade. I was like, oh my god, it's Hitler burning books. Like, this is like real, man. And I was so hyped. And I had such a good time. I remember going around, like, I was in year 7. I said to friends, like, have you all seen Indiana Jones? They're like, yeah, we've been watching this since we were kids. I was like, it's fucking amazing, isn't it? And then this one came out. And there's a real sad story here. So one of my friends who lived around the corner at the time, we were meant to go and watch it on the Sunday. I think it was a Father's Day weekend it dropped in the UK, or maybe a week or two after. And obviously, back when you're like 12, you don't really get... It's not like today I can just go to the cinema. It was a big event. Like, I'm going to go to the cinema with one of my friends from school. And I was like, yeah, all good. And then I got a phone call in the morning that he'd cancelled going because it was Father's Day. And his parents are quite strict. Like, no, you'll be with your dad all day. Whereas my dad's very chilled. He was like, yeah, you want to go cinema, just go. So I didn't get the chance to see it because my dad had never seen any of the films. So he didn't want to go. This was the fourth one. None of my siblings had seen them. So I just didn't go. I missed it at the cinema. Didn't pick up a DVD. Didn't know about the internet. And it was only until maybe I was like in year 11 or 12 when I went through South Park again and doing it in order. Have anyone seen the famous South Park episodes?
Yeah.
George Lucas. And it was kind of like a Star Wars prequel thing. I was like, wait, like people don't like the new Indiana Jones film. Like I've never seen it. And I don't know if I should admit this on the internet. I went to watch it that night, and Tate, you mentioned the early days of the internet. Does anyone remember, was it called Mega Video? Where you'd watch a film or TV show
was
back
it
in the
Mega
day.
Upload? There was one like that.
Mega something. And after 42 minutes, you would get told saying, you've watched 42 minutes today. You must now wait 3 hours or sign up for a premium account, etc. And I didn't. I watched the first 40 minutes of this film, and it ended with Shia LaBeouf at the train station. And I wasn't disliking it. I wasn't particularly enjoying it. But I was like, I can't be asked to wait 3 hours. I'm done here. So I went away. And fast forwards to 2015 Belgium Grand Prix. I was there with my friends. And on the Saturday night after qualifying, we're very tired. For some reason, we had BBC broadcast. And again, everything was in Belgium. Not Belgium. Is it French they speak there? I can't remember. And the Paramount logo was like, oh my God. It's an Indiana Jones film. Like, let's watch this tonight. We're absolutely killing it, guys. And then the opening shot's obviously the Elvis song, isn't it? With the thing. I was like, one of them was like, oh no, it's Indiana Jones 4. Like, let's go out for dinner. And honestly, that happened. We went out for dinner. We came back, and the film was still on. So I actually saw the last 20 minutes of this film before I'd seen the whole film. And I was like, aliens? Like, wait, is that the guy from Sexy Beast and the Bet365 adverts? Because obviously we're gonna get into that as well. And again, saw the ending of the film. Never cared. Never thought I'd watch it again. Fast forward to the drink along a couple of years ago, and I was like, shall I skip the drink along because I've not seen it? And let's have a laugh. Indiana Jones 5 is going to be out soon. Still waiting. And I didn't. Obviously, I watched it for the first time on the stream with on the drink along during the COVID drink alongs, which were actually pretty fun. Bar the Star Wars 3 one where I almost died.
No, that was the best one. I have fond memories of that one.
And I very much was like, I'm not going to watch Indiana Jones 4 again. I was sober. I wasn't drinking on that one, to be fair. But because I wanted to watch the film, and I was like, okay, I don't hate it as much as everyone else, but I certainly understand why it's obviously not held in such high regard. But I was very neutral because I think the difference will be I went in with like the rock bottom of expectations. Could I argue? So again, I thought, okay, I'll probably won't ever see that film again, or maybe before the new one comes out. And obviously, then the retrospective popped on earlier this year. I was like, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Who's going to be the one that joined me for that, Dave? You actually put it in your interest list. I was like, I'm going to cash that in because Ed had said I wanted to come on for 4. We're going to get Ed on again. We're going to get Ed on the top 10. And I was like, Dave, it's time to like cash in the check. Like, thank you for submitting this like 6 months ago. Looking back, I think you even said like no one's going to pick us. Actually, someone has, but I just went along with it anyway. And Tayte, of course, joining us as well.
Yes.
No, you were on the last one. I was going to say back from holiday. That was from Munich.
Yeah.
We're batch recording people at home, so honestly, this is going to be insane. But, we're 15 minutes in. That again, that's my elongated memory of this film. But what we're going to do, because this is actually a lot different to what I thought. The behind the scenes, I was expecting like a portfolio of, like Jurassic World, it was stuck in development hell for like 15 years.
Yeah.
There's like tons and tons of different
waiting for the technology and stuff like that, and just
This is quite simple. We've got some really easy behind the scenes for you at home, and some of you might not know this. Some of this was a surprise. So obviously, if you aren't familiar with a man called George Lucas, he of course created Star Wars, co-created Indiana Jones, and named Lucasfilm after himself. In the 90s, actually, this is a good question. Has anyone watched the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles?
No.
Because I've actually heard good stuff about them. So Harrison Ford has a cameo in one of the episodes on the series. And I think he's like, obviously in the 90s, he'd have been in his maybe late 40s, could we say? 40s, probably. And they aged him up to be an older Indiana Jones. He did a backstory for it. Apparently, George Lucas loved the idea and tried to get in at the time Harrison Ford to do an Indiana Jones 4. And Lucas actually told him he wanted to set it in the 50s with an older Indiana Jones. And he wanted it to be a B movie with aliens. Obviously, I'd pay good money to be in the room and Harrison Ford had that.
Were they drunk? That's my question. Like,
I don't know. I mean, we'll get to the, there's logic there to have the discussion. I'll say that there is logic to have a discussion on it.
Here's the thing.
Do it.
And this will come back to kind of the story and thoughts on kind of the story and stuff like that. But the biggest mistake they made with this film wasn't looking forwards. It was the failure to look backwards, because Indiana Jones has always been about ancient religion, kind of curses, artifacts, older things, and looking back into the past. And that's what's so cool about it. He's an archaeologist. The issue with this film is they tried to look towards the future, not only by aging it up from the years when the original Indiana Jones was set in, but by also making it, it's going to be, sure, an ancient civilization, but they worship kind of these future-like beings, and we're going to have stuff about the atom bomb. And it's almost like they went too far in one direction of trying to go, no, this is the new Indiana Jones, when everyone always wanted just the old Indiana Jones. Trying to do something different by making it more futuristic, instead of going, actually, what made people watch these was their love of the past and their love of history and their love of religion and cults and everything to do with that, instead of aliens, which is, no one ever wanted aliens in an Indiana Jones franchise. No one ever wanted that. People were happy with curses and voodoo and just all of that stuff because it was interesting, it was intriguing, but it had to do with history, it had to do with the past. There was no room for aliens in there at all.
I mean, I get that. To be honest, I wouldn't have minded if there were aliens, but I don't believe at any point Indiana Jones should have seen those aliens, or certainly that ship. There should be something else behind it. It just, I get it's George Lucas, and he had his MacGuffin, and he put that out. And his story credit with someone else on the credits on there. Spielberg has no real input outside of director on this one. I don't think he's on the other ones. He got story credit or more credit than just director, but certainly on this, that's all he's listed as. And it just, I don't know if he did it because his friend George really wanted to do another Indiana Jones movie. And it feels a little bit, while watching some parts, that Spielberg had his arm twisted a little bit by his friend George, who was like, please make this movie, please.
I'm with you on that fully. This is, I think, the big thing for me. Lucas dropped the idea in the 90s to then go and do the Star Wars prequels. That's like mental. I'm not going to do Indiana Jones. By the way, the Star Wars. That's just insane. But what really caught me off guard, before we even get Spielberg, M. Night Shyamalan was hired to do the script in 2002. 2002, I really like Shyamalan. I've not seen many of his films. and I know that some of them
In
are deemed some of the worst of all
2002, he
time.
was still considered to be a.
They had that
above
terrible
average
cover that killed his career when
director.
they called him the next Spielberg, didn't they? Do
Yeah,
you remember? And the thing with Shyamalan, even when his films don't work, he has my immediate respect because he persists with original films. He hasn't jumped. I know the Glass is kind of superheroes, but he hasn't gone out and said, let's do like a 10-film franchise. Let's do this. He always goes out with a premise for something different. And the backstory of him is that he was too overwhelmed to do an Indiana Jones film, and he never felt like everyone was on board with him, which is probably understand. I mean, for a young up-and-coming director to write an Indiana Jones, like, by the way, Spielberg's going to direct it, Lucas is going to produce it, and Harrison Ford's going to be in it. No pressure. And obviously that felt prequels happened. When it gets in 2008, apologies, mindset might just cut out. But when we jump to 2008 with this is kind of my, not my question as such, but it's clear as daylight that after the Star Wars prequels are done, George Lucas was like, right, guys, so in the mid-90s, I was going to do Star Wars. Now I'm going to do Indiana Jones. I feel that's how the conversation went. I feel it was let's do an Indiana Jones, because they would always do Indy after Star Wars. It was a very weird production across the original era. And what's really interesting, Dave, you mentioned about Spielberg and Lucas. I'm the same as both of you. I do think Spielberg wanted to do an Indiana Jones film, a fourth one, but I don't think, judging this series, Tayte, we spoke a lot in Munich. I know it would have been out, Dave, so you couldn't have seen it, but we spoke about how 9/11's completely affected Spielberg's career. War of the Worlds was a very, not reactionary, that sounds horrible, but War of the Worlds, Munich, Minority Report, granted that was before 9/11, just around the time of 9/11. Those films are so different. To then jump back into Indiana Jones, that's such a insane move away from what he'd been doing before. And it kind of stands out in this weird way, because even when this film being made, I want to bring this up because of this series, we're moving through history, and this is something more prevalent now than ever. A big thing of this was the secrecy. And obviously we can laugh at that today because everyone knows the concept of spoilers, set photos. We know where that is in today's culture, but 2008 spoiler culture wasn't a thing. For stuff to leak from films, that was a big deal. And
it wasn't spoiler culture. It was more of really weird rumors, and then maybe out of the 10 you heard, one of them was correct, and even then it wasn't even properly correct. It was only a half truth. That's
but again, nowadays it's we all want to know the spoilers. Whereas back then, people didn't. They were like, how do we puzzle it? And what I thought was fascinating of this is that one extra got sued because he broke his NDA. He did a sit-down interview with the newspaper to say, this is what I've done, this is what I've seen on the set. Obviously, that article got pulled and Lucasfilm found out he was sued. And then someone else broke into Spielberg's office to steal photos to sell online. And he got put in prison for over 2 years. That's actually mental. I know people do stuff like that, but to go for a film, and again, because I wasn't around, I was around in 08, but the age we are now, I'd say the age we are, the knowledge we all have on film, nowadays we expect that from a big film, that someone's going to go hunting for set secrets and stuff. I've done it. Oh, there's a film shooting near me. Let's see if I can get to the set or something like that. Or, back when I was at Pinewood, that's the Star Wars set, is it? Let's just have a gander and just walk as close as I can. Whereas, I think the world was different back then. Not that I'd have leaked anything anyway, but it's really interesting. And a big one is Karen Allen. They were going to keep it quiet. She was in the film, and then they just announced it midway through 07 that she was going to be in it because they thought it'd be too hard to keep quiet, which I kind of understand. Yeah, it just made me think. We haven't had her in the casting for 5 yet, so are they going to try and pull through this time?
Maybe. But it's a bit more difficult. It is a bit more difficult nowadays because there's set press that kind of comes in and takes photos anyway, and it's very difficult to keep a secret. The only way you're going to keep a secret is in a green screen room with only 4 people present. Nowadays, someone will blab at some point, and I guess back in 07 when this is being filmed, these are crazy stories. By the way, you have to imagine that at the time, Indiana Jones was one of the most biggest film franchises of all time at that point. It isn't anymore. It's been overtaken by a lot of other franchises that have come and gone. But back at the time, it was every single film is good and every single film has made decent money. So yeah, people would have been very excited for this, and therefore they would want to get their hands on any information possible. Which is crazy thinking back on it now. Imagine they're disgusted if they just saw, Area 51 photos as the 2 photos stolen or whatever it was,
Just a picture of Shia on a vine. Just,
what's this? Spielberg's directing a George of the Jungle film.
It's going to be so awkward for me to get to talk about him, isn't it? Especially, we'll get into it in a bit. But obviously, at the time of recording this week, there's been a lot of big news with him as well. Which
has been a lot of big news. Yeah,
some of it insane. But let's talk Spielberg. How do we feel? I mean, I want to say, how do we feel of his thoughts on the direction? I'm going to say a really weird thing. I don't think this is a badly directed film. It is probably and arguably his weakest film, or in his bottom 5. But in terms of my biggest issue is the CGI and the story. And we know he's not done the story. As you said, David, he's not got a credit for story. And in 2008, I don't want to blame Lucas, it sounds really horrible, but I was reading, for example, the chase sequence in the jungle. They film it on location. They're in Hawaii. And they just decided to add tons of CGI in post-production. And I think that looks abysmal. Because I was like, they just got a car on a green screen, but it was on and massacred it. It was very odd and very strange. But how do we? Am I in the minus again? Again, it's not very well directed, but I don't think he is the problem of this film. That sounds awful to say, but I'm in a very weird headspace with this on the direction standpoint.
He isn't the major problem in this film, but even then, this is a massive step down. Even from Munich being his last film before this, this is a humongous step down.
Yeah.
The only things where I kind of looked at the directing and thought it was pretty good was, I guess, the opening sequence before he gets to Nuketown. That opening sequence felt like old school Indiana Jones. There wasn't as much CGI. It felt like practical effects. It looked good. That was well directed. That was well shot. That was well everything across the board. But then you look at other scenes later on, and I don't know if it's whether the dialogue's clunky and we're talking about the actors there, but then it's the director who's kind of asking them to deliver it in that way. It's so hard to be able to judge in this film how much fault lies exactly with Spielberg. Because I wouldn't say the film was even particularly well shot from just a directing standpoint, and even from a cinematographer's standpoint, it's mostly CGI, and even when it's not CGI, it looks tacky. It's not like the old Indiana Jones films where everything felt real. As crazy, as batshit crazy as the stuff that was happening on the screen, it all felt like a massive adventure, whereas it felt like the direction kind of had all that life sucked out of it from this film. There was no enthusiasm. I don't know if that's just across the board, it was just wrong on every level, and therefore it never worked, or whether there is any blame to lie with Spielberg for this one.
It does stand out, like you say, especially with Munich being his previous movie, which is just on such a different level to this movie. And I think you're right, there are moments, and the opening sequence is probably right up there as my favorite from the moment the shadow of him picking up the hat and putting the hat on for the first time, and you get the theme playing a little, the adventure through the warehouse that we've been to before, we've seen a little bit of the Ark, and just there's magical moments in that first little bit. Jonesy. Outside of that, it's it gets ropey really quickly. The CG is a
Literally,
massive.
Bruce. It's
like they just got shot scenes, and it's just the background plates for everything. From the jungle to the ants when they're attacking.
Don't forget was it prairie dogs or chipmunks or whatever the hell they are?
The gophers, coming out of that. Those ants taking the guy going into his mouth. That was done so much better in The Mummy with the ones going into the beetles when they did it.
If it scares you as a kid, it's good. It means it's good. It's actually
such a better job.
It means something to you. Whereas this just makes you laugh.
Yeah, there's just so many plates, and you look at the background, it's like, oh, now it's standing out even more. That's not there in the background, and I can tell just by looking at it. Which even then, you probably noticed it a lot, but watching it last night was just like, it's really jarring, and it's hard to then pay attention to what's going on in the foreground when you look at the background. Like there's nothing behind them at all, or what they did have there, they had to take out completely because it wasn't what they wanted. And yes, maybe the CG and background art wasn't where they needed to be then, but it sounds like a sore thumb. I just think Spielberg, I obviously wasn't coerced. He got paid handsomely for doing another Indiana Jones movie. There's nothing wrong with that. And he would have gone into this full of, right, okay, we're shooting a new Indiana Jones movie. It just has so many points where it's like you've started well and you're just hitting downbeats for the rest of it where it doesn't quite work.
I'm kind of with you. Like it's tough, this, isn't it? 'Cause, I mean, even from the production standpoint, you've still got the likes of John Williams. I mean, this is Kaminsky's first, or not? Yeah, Sorry, his cinematographer. This week they've announced that his cinematographer Janusz Kaminski is going to be doing cinematography for Joseph Kosinski's new film. So we've got the Kaminsky and the Kosinski, which is just messing with my mind. Yeah. And kind of with that, as you said, like it doesn't. The way it's shot doesn't feel like an indie film. Even the end, when you've got like Shia LaBeouf awkwardly standing in the church, the credits rolling. I know it's meant to be the finale, so you're not going to get the sense of adventure. And obviously, Last Crusade's ending is so perfect.
Yeah,
no Indiana Jones film is probably ever going to match that. Good luck next year.
I mean, you could argue that it's one of the greatest film endings of all time.
Yeah, no, you could. And it's right up there with Return of the Jedi as well.
We should have. I've been pitching it for a while, but we should have a battle of the brackets for greatest film ending of all time.
Best ending.
Like everyone gets like murdered like a Nicolas Cage film.
Yeah.
What I kind of want to move on to, because we spoke about his direction. I don't want to harp on George too much because this is like mid-noughties George Lucas, who not doesn't care. People say he never cared, but this is very much, especially after the I Am documentary,
taking a lot of flack at the moment. At this point
he is. He's taking flack, and I think now again it's 2022. The ILM documentaries come out, and you're getting all these people like, "Oh, George Lucas actually was a pioneer." It's like, yes, he fucking was, dickheads, and you all bullied him to sell his company. But they pretend they never bullied George Lucas. After all, it was innocent. They loved the prequels. He literally left, sold it, says, "Well, everyone's going to have a go at me if I say." You know how sad that is. Like, not to get into a tangent, but for George Lucas to come out saying, "If I'd have said I was making a Star Wars film, people would just get even angry at me." That's so depressing to look back on now. 10 years since Disney took over this year, by the way, as well. And again, I can understand why he took the approach he did because he's such an innovator. He was looking, as you said, Tate, really well, actually, the story points that he was looking forwards. And I think he's always said, his strength isn't directing. That's why he enjoys being a producer. He enjoys being involved within the stories, but not doing the writing. He knows his strengths. But I would say for this, he's so entwined on the idea of the aliens. And I just imagine Spielberg's one of his best friends. I just imagine that he probably knew this is George Lucas. If I don't direct this film, he's going to find someone that will. Because at that point in time, not William Osborne, no one says no to me, but it's George Lucas. He owns Lucasfilm. He can do what he wants. And it's a really interesting predicament because I do feel that Spielberg, probably tried his best. But again, I think the source material, what they were trying to do, it's probably tough. And I actually want to talk about the nuke in the fridge scene because this is a real fascinating standpoint. This is the one thing everyone blames Lucas for. Spielberg's gone on record multiple times saying this was his idea, that he chose to do this. He chose to put this scene in. And he says that he wanted to stop people having to go at Lucas for it because that was his fault. And people then turn around and say it was still George Lucas' fault. And George Lucas has come out saying that he did do research that there's a 50-50 chance of surviving a nuclear bomb if you're hiding in a fridge. Which is, I'd love to find what scientists put that.
Yeah, Christ. Was that a scientist, saying to his workers who are working near the nuclear bomb, "Don't worry, if you're in trouble, just hide in a fridge, you'll be fine"?
It's probably the sort of scientists that are going to be like, Bill Gates is putting chips in your head if you take a vaccine. But
yeah,
I think, again, I don't want to just speculate on the nuclear fridge because it's just, not that it's boring. Obviously, we have to talk about it. It's this film. It's part of the retrospective. But I feel that society's moved on now where the people that go around abusing films have got their eyes fully on a new TV series premiering on Amazon every Friday.
Yeah.
But don't worry, guys. This is all going to come back next year for Indiana Jones 5.
But dare I say, I still call it, if a franchise goes to
nuking the fridge. It's a great term. It's a great term. It's. I never liked Jump the Shark, but I think that's because I never knew the context of it, and I don't like sharks anyway.
And also, jumping the shark with the Fonz, it was a massive thing at the time. It's not as big of a thing now because it's like, oh, cool, a character who was bigger than life jumped over a shark on a jet ski in a show where, you know, you could imagine him on a jet ski jumping over a shark. It was outlandish, but, you know, it wasn't like... But if you said to someone, and I always take this rule mainly with sequels of films and stuff like that, from the first film that's made, if you've got a sequel and you want to know whether it fits or not, just imagine scenes from that sequel being written when the first film was made. So original Indiana Jones, Massive Adventure, Ancient Curses and stuff like that. If you go into the future and you say Indiana Jones climbs into a fridge and survives a nuclear bomb, do you go, oh yeah, I can see that fitting in with the first film? Or do you go, no, that doesn't fit even slightly. What's that doing in an Indiana Jones film? Same with the whole aliens thing. It just doesn't work. It doesn't fit in there. Like, it's just, you can never see it. Whereas with all of the other things that, like we've said about George Lucas and the other franchise that he's worked on, the major one, you can kind of see everything that happens from all of the films happen. That's why it's okay to have those things. It's just an interesting rule that I go by, but it seems to work most of the time with, can you imagine that happening in the original film or as a continuation of the original film? If not, then no, it doesn't fit. It doesn't work.
It's a plot point that is there for that moment only, and for them to be in that empty town, because it's never revisited. It's not part of, this is not a nuclear story. This is not about stopping some nuclear arm, which you maybe expect after he's there is in the explosion at the heart of that, and maybe the adventure was something that the Russians were trying to then create a bomb or something like that. Then it would carry on with that device, and you go, okay, then I can see kind of why they did it and why he needs to be in the explosion to have seen what happens with this and how deadly it is, and that he's off to try and stop this. But then for it to just be a point to get him really nowhere different than he was, he's trying to escape. He didn't, and he found that town. It's never visited. It seems a really random plot point to put in there, apart from the story point that we want to show the nuclear tests that we're doing. But I hate the fact it's not revisited. It's not part of the plot.
It's like, hey guys, it's the 50s. They did nuclear tests.
Yeah, I wish it would been part of the plot.
Or even better, hey guys, it's that COD map you all love. That's it.
Well, this is it, and I think with the way I'm kind of looking at Indy, I don't know if they're the same age, but I think Spielberg was born in 41. I'd imagine Lucas, they're similar ages, those two. They're all in their 30s when they did Jaws and Star Wars. The nuclear bomb obviously happened when they were like toddlers. And obviously,
he was born in 46.
46, so just before he was born. But growing up, that would have been the whole nuclear wars on the horizon with the Russians. And obviously, you go to the early films, and that's before they were around. That's like, I know it's only the 30s, but that's the whole, like, here's the past. George Lucas, you know, he loved his serial pulp adventures and whatnot. And it's almost like it's we're in the 50s now. We remember that. It might be we remember this now. And I think that's why it dives into it, because it's such again, as you said, Dave, it's got nothing to do with the story. It is there because let's have a nuclear bomb. And ironically, Oppenheimer's brought up later on. I don't know if anyone clocked that when she does the father of death speech. And what's really cool is not a teaser for next year. Obviously, this isn't real for Oppenheimer, but obviously Oppenheimer was a communist, or was made out to be a communist. So that was really actually a cool nod, bringing the Russians into it with him. But even down to the villains, we're in the 50s now. You can't have the Nazis anymore. They're gone. They've been defeated, unless you get some Argentinian exiles. And we have the Russians, communist comrades, which I think is pretty great. I mean, we haven't got into performances yet, but they waste Cate Blanchett, but the use of Russians I enjoyed. We'll get into that a little bit more. But what I kind of want to jump to both is, how do you actually feel on this? I mean, okay, we spoke about aliens. This is going to be a really short piece. We'll go into character history after, but how do you feel with the actual story concept? That
looking for
even
ancient idols,
but it's murky because he's never actually looking for it. The Russians are looking for it, and he's dragged into it quite literally in the opening. It's almost like it's by chance, and this is where I'm kind of detracted and compared to, because the Ark of the Covenant is exactly what Marion's father was trying to accomplish in the first one. And there's a reason for him to be involved in that. The Last Crusade, Henry Jones's work is all about the idol, not the idol, sorry, the
Grail,
the drink, sorry, Grail,
yeah.
Grail,
the Grail
and
drink.
There are character reasons for Indy to be invested, whereas in this one, I always just feel it's like, oh yeah, the Russians are looking for it, and he just got dragged into it, and it never really feels personal to him. And that's kind of what takes me out of the story for this, is that although they do the personal stuff with a wife and a son, it never feels like an Indiana Jones film enough. Is that a weird take?
No, that's a perfectly fine take, and I completely understand it. Like, absolutely. It works with an older Indy and him aging up. Of course, with Harrison Ford getting older, you have to age it up. I don't think the performance is all there, but given the story beats, it does feel like he's just being dragged around like a piece of furniture. Like, he has zero input into the story until a little bit later on, where he does a little bit of puzzle solving. And that's what he's become at this point in the series. He's not actually going off and doing the adventure himself, figuring out stuff for himself. He's forced into a situation, literally put in front of a Rubik's Cube and told to solve it. And that's all that he's there for. There's no adventure really that he takes part in past the first scene that like commands him to actually, do some investigative work. It's all just straight up, oh, I'm in a room now that has all the clues in it. Let's find the clues that work. Yes, it's that. Okay, I'm in a place now. I've got to translate the sentence. Okay, I've translated it. It's just boring at that point for his character, which I wouldn't blame Harrison Ford too much for it. Like, he trained really hard for this role. Like, he was in the gym, was it 3 times a day or something like that? Like, ridiculous.
He's a unit still, and he's 80.
Yeah,
he was going on bike rides around Newcastle. Dave, you could have seen him.
Of course, yeah. Every day you get photos like people on Facebook like, I'm just here and Harrison Ford's gone past. Weird.
Yeah. But like, he was obviously committed to the role. It's just that like the story didn't allow him to actually, play it out properly, and it ended up being quite a boring performance because of it.
Forced me when I was watching it yesterday that had this been a National Treasure film, like the Nicolas Cage movie, had this been a National Treasure movie, I'd buy that. And that would kind of fit in with that. What we feel, Nicolas Cage being the guy looking for aliens, especially when he's doing the eye stare into it, going, and Harrison Ford starts pulling funny faces towards the end of it. Like, put that there, or make this not so much the Indiana Jones adventure, move it on to Mutt's character, make it solely about his son on his adventure. Like, make it that him off to save Marion still would work with Mutt taking that role. And yes, it wouldn't have maybe be called Indiana Jones movie. You'd maybe have to have maybe adjusted that very slightly, but I feel it could have been a much better film and tighter film had that been a bigger role.
Yeah.
Much better film, Dave. You missed it.
Mutt Jones in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But yeah, I just feel they just need to focus that, but it doesn't work for me as an indie film, but I can see how it would. And the minute you let Indiana Jones see the aliens, that for me is where it was written off for. Is like, that's not what you need from Indiana Jones film. He should never have seen them. He should have figured more out, and it should have been something that the Russians all saw this alien, and we can see the alien, but Indy should never see that alien. Should never ever see that ship rising at the end and flying off ever.
I'm kind of with you, and even merge it into the Harrison point, because I don't think Harrison gives a bad performance, but he's not got much to work with because there's no actual character development of like, I've got a kid, let's get married. That's it. Like, and
let's do the joke about snakes again. Tell me it's a rule. Do it.
That's the scene that sticks out. It's like, I know, again, I wasn't obviously into film as much then, like I'm now. We're in the Indiana Jones, we're in the grumpy Harrison Ford era, aren't we, in the mid to late noughties. And this is going to sound grim, but after the plane crash for Harrison in what was it, just before Force Awakens came out?
Yeah.
He's took a very different, and not view on life because we don't know him, but in the public eye, he's far more, not with it, that sounds horrible. his public persona has probably changed a bit, where I feel that as he's a bit older, he's maybe had a near-life accident or whatnot. He's just been very different in the media's eyes. And this is what kind of strikes me with this film, because there's a behind-the-scenes stuff of, I think Harrison Ford called Shia LaBeouf out. Shia LaBeouf criticized this film like a year after it came out, and basically it was terrible, it's rubbish. Harrison Ford's like, he's a stupid idiot, basically. And he said that even if you do a bad film, you don't go around saying you've done a terrible film. And I kind of really respect Harrison, because the one thing with him, there is no sign this is his favorite role he's ever done. Yeah. I mean, if you know about the Chris Pratt stuff, didn't he like tell Chris Pratt, like, I'm Indiana Jones, not you. I'll be Indiana Jones.
Once I die, that's it. There's no more Indiana Jones. Yeah.
Yeah. And like Chris Pratt's probably like shitting himself. And it's kind of how I feel this, that not approaching the new one, the fifth one, but I maintain the fact we would not have a fifth Indiana Jones film if this was good. I think if this was good, this would have been a ride off into the sunset. And I think now I would argue, because obviously Spielberg had to drop out. That genuinely was down to I think he had to basically pick any West Side Story or this, or Indiana Jones 5, sorry, not obviously for Crystal Skull. But I think for whatever reason, he couldn't do it. But he's still involved as a producer. No idea if he's got a story credit. We'll find out next year. But he's still heavily involved in Indiana Jones. And obviously, Harrison Ford is very much involved. Kathleen Kennedy, of course, who's done all of the Indiana Jones films, of course, running the show. And this is what I kind of feel of him, that, as I said, Harrison Ford has this attachment to the character, and he clearly feels he didn't do it in this. And I just don't think he had any material to work with in this film, if I'm being honest. And I think I'm kind of the same with a lot of the characters. Like, even if I'm going to talk about Marion, Karen Allen coming back, I don't think she gets much, because it's lovely to see her. I'm going to boil her. I was going to boil her character down into one sentence. She has a son. That's it. Yeah, that's her entire character. And they get married. Yeah, and I feel that to bring her back, because she's energetic, and it's great, because and the one thing I'll give this one a lot of credit for is they do reiterate that Marion was always the one, and that's one of the very good moments, is those two in the truck. He says, they weren't you, honey, and I love that, because I think Marion was missing from the other films. As much as I don't mind them, I actually quite like Cate Capshaw in the second one, but I understand a lot of people's issues. But she's not Marion, and I like the fact they do go for that personal life stuff. I just don't think it's executed that well. And I was going to move on to give us your thoughts on Marion, then I'll bring up Shia LaBeouf, because we'll just get that away, because again, that's going to be tricky.
Because I'm going to talk more in general about the supporting cast, shall we say, because Marion comes in halfway through the film. You've also got Oxley, played by John Hurt, who is a fantastic actor, has so much potential, and is left to babbling in this film. And I guess to a lesser extent, Ray Winston, who kind of puts in a performance that you'd only expect from Ray Winston. Like that is him. Like, you wouldn't expect anything else. But just in general, the supporting cast feels so supporting in this film, like boiled down to one single element, like no development at all between any of the characters, so cut and dry. There's no like character change between them in the film. There's no real exchanges which stand out between any of them. It's just they've been thrown in there to pad out the film, which is really, really bad, because you've got some really interesting characters in there. You've got the double crossover, which is Mac, Ray Winston's character, where you could go into so many details of reasons as to why he's crossing each side, but really it's always just money. I'm there. I can't do a good enough accent for it. If you want to go for it, Dave, I'm there for the money, and that's always what I'm there for.
Don't worry, it's coming.
Yeah. But same with like Marion. Marion's just there because Indy needed a son, and therefore Indy needed a wife. It's not because they want her back because of the memories and the kind of the good times and to kind of homage the first film. It's literally because the plot point is Indy has a son, therefore Indy needs to have a wife. It's not the opposite way around, like Indy has a wife and therefore, this is actually the son and stuff. It's so backwards, and it's not a way to bring back a cast member to kind of, into the fold or anything like that. It's just done cheaply with those kind of side characters.
And I think the same. Yeah, she's brought back, which you're right. It's lovely to see her. It's lovely to have Marion back. It's lovely to her and Indy still have this chemistry, even though they don't really relate that much throughout the rest of the movie. I say the moment where he says "None of them were you" is lovely. But yeah, she's very one note that she has no real development from where she was. She was just a girl he left. And apart from say she's there to present, oh, he's your son. And that's kind of a moment where she's like, no, you've got a son. Yeah, he's your son. He's a big snake. Get out of this pit. And that's kind of where she's left. She doesn't have much more. It's again out of the Ray Winston is as Ray Winston as he always is, Jonesy, and that's literally the only thing else. I just and while you're right, you didn't have enough to kind of say I'm not your bad. I'm not a bad guy. I'm a good guy. I might be a bad guy, and it just wasn't. It was so quick as well. There was no development of, like Tayte said, there was no development of that story as to why he was jumping back and forth so much. Was he working for somebody? Was this always a plan? You never knew. And obviously he just gets, I was going to say he gets sucked off at the end. And that's a different film.
A very different Indiana Jones.
Wow.
Indiana Jones 6, ladies and gentlemen.
He watched Nope. And it was the original Nope.
Yeah. And for the money as well. God.
Yeah, it's honestly. And he gets dissipated off into the dimension that they're going into, whatever that is. But yeah, it's just I just feel the only real one who has any sort of development is Mutt, and they should have given him even more to do, I feel, than they did. Especially the wedding scene. I guess we'll talk about it probably later, but it just doesn't cut at the right moment. It's just left. It's left to go to black for about 3.5 minutes too long while the crowd filter out. But yeah, Mutt's really the only one I have. Cate Blanchett is just
wasted.
Russian villain, and we're just gonna she's got a really weird accent as well that I can't get around. She's not supposed to be from Russia, but still I can't play it. But
can I jump in on Mutt very quickly?
Yeah.
Make a very swift comment about Mutt. Because Shia LaBeouf is a talented but very, very, very controversial actor. And we've known this about his entire career. Just like there's always something going on in the background. I know there was stuff about him a few years ago.
It's all current.
It's all current at the moment. Well, he's also been cast in something today.
This is what I was getting into. This is the drama now. So also about this week, Don't Worry, Darling. The PR tour from hell, and we're recording this on the 1st of September. I'm going to do the shy stuff quickly. If you aren't familiar, because I'm going to tell you what, this is going to crop up again in the next 3 weeks before Don't Worry, Darling comes out. So he was originally cast in Don't Worry, Darling, not Harry Styles. And they'd announced they'd sacked him from the role. Obviously, there's a legal case happening with, I can't ever pronounce her name, FKA Twigs, the rapper who co-starred with him in Honey Boy. They were together. Very abusive. I'm not going to go over details. You can read it. It's disgusting. You might have heard about even the stuff with dogs to get into characters vile. But that all came out, I want to say, after Honey Boy. Honey Boy was essentially the film in which Shia was going to have his redemption. And obviously what happened after his FK Twigs was in that film. And that's when all the side stuff kicked off. And what's kind of transpired is that Shia LaBeouf admitted that his dad wasn't actually abusive. That he'd lied about the whole story of Honey Boy, about his dad, which is just fundamentally like disgusting. To make him, I know it's a whole fictional story, but it was based off his childhood and whatnot. And Honey Boy is a fantastic film. So they've screwed over Alma Harrell, the director in there, who's a wonderful director, and I think she's doing a few documentaries now as well. And obviously, what's transpired is that Olivia Wilde has come out saying the reason she sacked Shia LaBeouf is because she was scared for Florence Pugh and wanted to protect her. And what has then come out, Shia LaBeouf has directly gone to Vanity Fair or Hollywood Reporter, whoever ran the original article, saying, "Hi guys, here's an official statement. This isn't true. I was not sacked. Here's my emails where I quit the film because I wasn't being given rehearsal time. And by the way, here's a video of Olivia Wilde begging for me not to quit." And they obviously released the video to the public eye, to which she also makes a dig at Florence Pugh, which, if you didn't already know about the behind-the-scenes aggro that was heavily rumoured, that's clearly all facts. And Venice is next week at the time of recording. We'll fight, and apparently Florence is doing no press after Venice, but the red carpet's going to be an interesting one. So That's like part one.
Yeah.
Part two is that following on from the Olivia Wilde video, we're in a very weird situation. Again, this isn't obviously like a channel statement. This is the news. I don't want to call it the uncancellation, but what we're seeing now, akin to the Depp situation, which is very different. Now that there is some genuine false evidence out there about his name, people are going to shove everything else to the side that was facts. And Francis Ford Coppola, one of the greatest directors ever, is self-funding Megalopolis. I can't pronounce it. It's got a very weird name. It's been his dream project. He's never had funding. He's self-funding it. It's took him years to do. An incredible cast, including Adam Driver in the leads. I think Zoe Kravitz. There's some massive names.
Oh, it's going to become like the Oppenheimer list, basically.
Yeah, everyone who's anyone who was desperate to be in it, because it's Coppola's first film in however long. It's his dream project. And today it's come out that Shia LaBeouf has been cast in the film. Within 2 weeks of Olivia Wilde's interview, he did an interview with John Berthnell as well last week on John Berthnell's Instagram. So the PR game is a strong. And the reason why I'm talking about this in this video, because it's tricky, because again, we don't really comment on legal stuff. Obviously, we're not going to put anything on our feeds about the Depp Amber Heard stuff. We've all got our own opinions on that, but we don't tend to get involved in the legal side of stuff. Obviously, this channel's been involved in some legal stuff recently, which we also can't get into on the on the video. But watching this film on the week of all this coming out, when Shia appeared, it was a very awkward moment for me, because it's like when Kevin Spacey pops up in classic films, and you're like, it's such a good film, and he's a great actor, but I just can't. Something's different now, and obviously Shia's different, younger actor, way different stuff going on, still abusive, and should not be doing films. But watching this film, and I have to put it into context of in 2008 when this film came out, he'd worked with Spielberg on Transformers. To me, he was one of my favorite actors growing up. Even Stevens is one of the greatest comedies I watched growing up. I still absolutely love it. I rewatched it all after Honey Boy, because it was on Disney Plus, which was fantastic, and it was really nice to revisit that. And obviously, based off what we were all told in Honey Boy, is experienced very, very, very traumatic childhood. And you got to think, oh wait, he was like the future A-lister. And I wouldn't say he's like the original Chris Pratt, because that Shia LaBeouf was way younger, but it was like he's just done Transformers. Now he's going to be the next Indiana Jones. Obviously, that hasn't happened. We're all sure he won't be in Indy 5. And I don't care about continuity, if I'm being blunt. Like, they'll probably just not mention him.
They probably won't mention this entire film, I'll be honest. I think they'll want to do
I am the same. Maybe he's married to Marion, maybe.
You might get the tiniest little cameo or something like that.
I think we'll get Karen Allen. And it'll be something probably really depressing like Peggy and Winter Soldier. But the only reason we're bringing the Shia stuff is because it's very hard to talk about his character, if I'm being blunt, at the moment. And it's very awkward timing for this video. But if I'm going to go back to Mutt, sorry, I don't think he's bad in the film. I think he's another one. The source material is there. But also, Shia LaBeouf is not an action actor. He works wonders in Transformers because he's a stupid teenager that's just got a car that's a Transformer, and it's that Spielberg-esque story of like the concept of Transformers. It's the young boy that gets a Transformer turns. It's like E.T. arriving to Earth to meet Elliot. And I think it was short-sightedness for him to be in this film. I think you needed a different kind of actor, or Mutt needed to be like a nerdy, bullied American, the whole the 50s bar type thing. Yeah. He needed to be the sort of person that would get picked on. He isn't, the badass. He's not a Danny Zuko greasing the hair on the motorbike. I don't think Shia was ever that, and I feel like he's miscast, but I don't think he's been bad in the role. But also, I just can't see him as Indiana Jones' son, if I'm being honest. At no point do I feel like he... Yeah, but I mean, Adam Driver, again, one of the best actors of a generation. I look at his character, I look at him in that... he looks a tiny bit Harrison Ford, but I see across the films, granted, yeah, 3, there are Han Solo mannerisms in his performance. The really little things like the point of the finger or the shrug shoulders.
Well, the question is, like, Adam Driver, the kind of actor who would go and study kind of the previous films and go and look at it and look at mannerisms and look at familial ties and stuff like that and really get into it. Shia LaBeouf, who looks like he was just kind of pointed at and going, you'll do, like, you're a popular actor at the time, we'll have you in because it will draw people into the film, it will draw in the new generation. And using people as a drawing for a film, not because you actually want them in the film, but because you want to draw in a certain audience or crowd, it's, it didn't work. It doesn't work. Like, you can't get the popular actor in because, we want the popular actor in, we want to fill the seats. It's the issue at the moment with a lot of animated films. They're casting major A-list stars instead of actual voice actors who could probably do a better job, just because they're like, oh, but people will like it when this person does this voice of this cat. It's like, no, just get in a voice actor who could do a better job. And this is exactly what's happened with this film. Instead of casting someone who could be Harrison Ford's son, could be the next generation, they've gone for, let's look at action films. Who would work? Who would fit this role? Sure, Shia LaBeouf. Yeah, he's popular. He's about the right age. He'll do for it. And that's what they did in the end for that role, which is a shame.
Weirdly, I'm on the other side of the scale on this, that I actually really like Shia LaBeouf in this performance. I do buy him as the run-on to Indiana Jones. I did feel that watching it this time, that, you know what? I enjoy his performance. I enjoy that kid who's not been brought up by Indy, he's been brought up by somebody else. And he is just that 50s greaser who is finding out he has this whole other life, this whole other side that he's going to now walk into and start to discover. By the end of the movie, he's starting to kind of find that. And yes, look, LaBeouf at the moment is someone that, yes, there's problems around. Obviously, himself has issues with alcohol, it looks like it is, and then obviously the abuse stuff that's gone through, and obviously you don't condone anybody's behavior on how they live their life and the acts they've gone through. So basing it only on sort of his performance for me is I just really enjoy him. I could see him when he picked up that hat in the end scene, and it's looking at that, for me, that moment is like, you know what, okay, I buy that he could then later on pick up the mantle and be on those adventures. For me, that was just, it worked as I watched it this time round. But yeah, it's obviously never going to happen. You're never going to. I think you'll get a of Marion and maybe Mutt in the next movie as a sidebar, as a side beat to say, this is what's happening. Because if you have watched those previous movies, we're going to tell you just something, and it might be a line, just a throwaway, and then we move on into the rest of our story. But I like Shire in this movie. I really do.
I think it's fair to
maybe not swinging in the trees,
maybe
not with his monkey friends. That's too far. But yeah, generally,
it just makes it so tricky. And also, it's the first time I saw it. He's his son the moment he turns up. It's such an obvious thing for them to do. Like, they don't even tease it. I mean, they don't. To be fair, they don't make it a revelation at the last 5 minutes too. But it's very much that setup. Like, he's clearly going to be the son. Take the mantle. Having the hat just yet. Harrison Ford probably filming it like, you're not getting my fucking hats. That's probably how Harrison Ford was on set that day. That wasn't, sources will say that scene didn't actually happen. He was meant to take the hat, and Harrison Ford's like, not on my watch, he doesn't. But no, it's a tricky one, isn't it, with him, because it's so geared up to him to lead a future franchise, and I'd happily bet on the fact that had this have been lauded by critics and fans, I mean, we'll get to critics in a bit, I think this would have been I think there could have been more. I think that's probably their plan. I think their plan would have been to do a second or third one. Obviously, he was doing Transformers films as well, working on some of the biggest films at the time. But obviously, it didn't work out that way. And if that's going to round out some of the characters, let's talk the soundtrack. Mr. John Williams. It's hard to talk soundtracks of Indiana Jones because you've set this insane standard with it. It doesn't not sound like Indiana Jones. That's the best way I can describe it. When there's adventure, there's a great score to it. When there's action, there's a great score to it. When there's drama, you get the mellow moments. There's something about these Indiana Jones films where, again, like John Williams rarely misses anyway. But I feel on a personal note, what we spoke about Harrison Ford, how personal these films are to him. I'd even argue Spielberg, probably with his relationship with George Lucas, looking at his career and what avenues it helped push further. I wonder if Williams is a part of that. Like, John Williams, like, I've just done Star Wars. I've done loads of Spielberg films. Now the two will merge into Indiana Jones. There's something about it, and there's something about the fact that John Williams' final score is going to be Indiana Jones 5, even though he has now said in an interview he really wants to do the next Bond film, which completely took me off guard. But Harrison Ford and John Williams going off into the sunset in Indy 5, that's kind of exciting. And I think this score's fine in this. There's nothing that's jumping out to me. But again, it feels and sounds like an Indiana Jones score should.
It's adventurous, and every now and then he does the Indiana Jones main theme. That's all you want from an Indiana Jones film. You don't want anything new, you don't want anything different. The theme is so well crafted from the first film that you don't need to really change anything about it. You don't need to have any other beats in there. Just play that theme on repeat for the entire film and it would work. You know it would. Like, this film, the music was fine outside of it, but to say that is such a high standard already. Like, the music in all of the Indiana Jones films is good music. To say it's fine is to really say it's top tier stuff, but you know it's not different from the others. But yeah, you just play that kind of quick beat from the start and it's like, yeah, sure, I'm in. Like, just music wise, yeah, go for it.
But that's like exactly that. I didn't even notice a score apart from when the Indy theme played, and that's literally the only time my ears would perk up to the soundtrack. Like, oh, the Indy theme's playing, and now I can smile because it's the Indy theme, and that's kind of all I can give the score. And yes, the rest of it's probably fine, but the whole movie, it never once crossed me to think, oh, the music in this is really good, until that came on, and then you're like, oh, great, and now it's got off again. So I'll just concentrate on the rest of the movie. So yeah, it's not for me a strong score, but how can you go wrong when you've got that piece of music to play? We'll play it a bit slowly now because we're in a sad, but we'll play it a bit. Now we'll play it full loud because on Adventures. Great piece of music.
No, definitely. And moving on from soundtrack, we get to talk about the legacy. Here we go. Impact upon release. And this is what I found amazing. So, critics' reviews were positive. Again, this is the ultimate Rotten Tomatoes test. I don't know if you're both familiar with this. Rotten Tomatoes, to me, it's a very interesting score. I never take much from Rotten Tomatoes. The concept of Rotten Tomatoes, people don't fully grasp. Every film starts at 100%. If it gets a 6 and above, it's a fresh, it's a yes. If it's not, it's a no. It aggregates the score downwards from 100%. Metacritic does it from 50, backwards or forwards. People don't understand it. It's not a percentage that grades the film. It's a percentage of people that enjoyed it.
Here's the thing. On IMDb, it's rated 6.1. So what's the bet here that everyone voted, it's a 6 out of 10 film. It's not very good, but it's kind of middle ground.
Just some people, it was like a 9. Just some, it might have been a 2. And again, it aggregates. This sits at 78% of Rotten Tomatoes, which that's not uncommon for blockbusters. And also people, Rotten Tomatoes in 2008 is very different to Rotten Tomatoes in 2022. Yeah. Way less people back then. I'm going to be blunt. Back then, there was more actual real critics, not to criticize people. They are opening, they're bringing on more people. But there's a lot of people I know that write for recognized outlets who can't get approval. Yet there are people that write for unnecessary, not unnecessary, disgusting. There are people that write for outlets that aren't at any size in comparison to others and they get approved. So I don't understand Rotten Tomatoes' process most of the time anymore. I feel that the modern audience is wise enough to move past it, but it is interesting as an aggregator looking back. That's positive.
Yeah.
And even the legacy stuff, a lot of it was mixed at the time. Obviously, fan reception was immediately on the low. That South Park episode I mentioned dropped 5 months after. We know South Park write their episodes in a week, but it was still very clearly fresh in their minds. But box office-wise, $790 million.
Yeah, but you could say the same for the new Jurassic World film. Like,
yeah, but that's relied on China. But 790 million in 2008 is a lot better than $1 billion today. And I think it was the 24th highest grossing film in history when it came out, which is pretty impressive. And obviously, it was second in the year to The Dark Knight, which I think was ended up fourth. It was like the third. Was it the fourth $1 billion film? I can't remember. Now there's 49 of them. 50 because Jurassic Park will get it by the time this video comes out. But no Oscar nominations, 1 BAFTA for visual effects. There's an irony there. But how is it perceived today? And this is why I'm fast forwarding through the other stuff, because
generally it's hated. It's really disliked amongst most of the communities. A lot of people have been onto the Indiana Jones subreddit a few times, and it's not well liked. They'd rather remember back into the olden days of the kind of original trilogy, and imagine that riding off into the sunset. A lot of people calling it unnecessary, and on reflection, it doesn't bode well. The fact that when we were choosing terrible films to do a drink along to, this was like the number 2 choice and was the second one we did. It shows. And I think it was because it was one of the first times that a big franchise, I know Star Wars had its own flack with the prequels, and as much as our generation enjoyed the prequels, a lot of people from the older generation really disliked the prequels. Upon release, and were quite hateful towards it and really dreadful towards it. With this film, it was like, oh, Indiana Jones is coming back. Oh, this is going to be really good. It's a franchise that hasn't been touched yet. It's got good grounding. It's an adventure film. You can't really go wrong with an adventure film. And it's like, ooh, it's not exactly what everyone expected. And also it strayed into very, it cross lines within its own community and territories. So is it perceived well? Not really nowadays. It's kind of the butt of the joke. And like we said, nuking the fridge is still a term used by people in cinema. So therefore it's still, prevalent.
Yeah. It's when you say that the Newt in the fridge thing, when that sticks around, that becomes part of the zeitgeist of it. It's kind of one of those stamps of like, okay, we did something that is going to be held for a long time as a moment of disapproval. I think it's really hard when you're coming off almost, to me, a perfect movie and a perfect ending to a story, as Last Crusade was. I think they suffered the fact Connery wouldn't come back as well. I believe he was asked to come back to reprise his role, and he refused to come back, so they lost that part of it. And then you lose that part of the magic that was there as well, because people really, really enjoyed that relationship in the previous movie. Yeah, I think unnecessary is probably the biggest term you could put towards it, because it wasn't needed. You have a lot of other film franchises out there that go back and forward, so like Star Wars did. They went back into the prequels and the sequels, and you kind of think, all right, you've kind of got your own universe to work in. The Indiana Jones films worked so well as this solid trilogy of movies, and like the writing. You're right. I mean, you've probably talked about this in your Last Crusade video, but it has one of the best endings, that they're all together. They're riding off at the sunset. It's just wonderful. And this, yeah, for me, it's something I won't revisit again, probably in maybe ever, maybe depending on what the next Indiana Jones movie is like, that I may revisit. But I would always revisit and watch if they were on TV. It's one of those tests. If you come across an Indiana Jones movie that's on BBC, sometimes you go, oh, which one? Oh, I'm in. I'm going to watch this right through because I have such a good time with it. If this was on TV, I would flick to see what else was on before I even settled into any moment of it. Just like, nope, no, not for me, thanks. It just doesn't hold up as a good indie movie for me. While it has beats that I enjoy, that's all it is. A couple of moments.
I'm kind of with it, and one thing that I'm really intrigued by is that when George Lucas basically went into knowing that him and David Koepp have done interviews, and he said that he wasn't surprised that people didn't like it, but he said he expected it because of the Star Wars prequels anyway. So he was prepared, which is, I guess you can get away with saying that if you're George Lucas. But yeah, as I said, it's the one that's picked on. Shout out to Ed again. She's just going nice in the film. He likes bits of it. I still maintain it's not as bad as people say. It's not one of the worst ones I've ever seen in my life. It's just more that you gotta put it in context to the legacy of the original trilogy, and I think that's where the steep decline comes from. And also shout out to one of my friends, Liv, who very passionately says it's one of her favorite Indiana Jones films.
I think,
but that's because she's a big fan of Marion.
I was going to say, like they said, if it's a national treasure film, then it works.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, and that's kind of it. And moving on from that, we spoke about how it's today. I'm going to ask you both a question. Indiana Jones 5 is coming out next year. Again, we might have footage and details by the time this video goes up. We'll probably have a video if it does as well. How do we feel right now about Indiana Jones 5? We've got James Mangold directing because Spielberg couldn't commit, which I really respect. I think they've got a very good director. There's been a couple of leaks from them shooting on location. There's no actual story leaks. It's only people trying to piece stuff together, which I know they are far from reality on. How do we just feel about a fifth one? Do we feel the timing's right? There's been a long enough gap between 4 and 5. Do we feel that Harrison's not just a better age, but that sounds horrible, but it feels like it will be the last ride, as they've said. Obviously, they can't call it the Last Crusade. Probably would have been a great name, actually, now. How are we feeling about Indy 5? Again, just right now, not because of this film, but just more, we are talking Indiana Jones.
My immediate reaction is if they bring back Ke Huy Quan, then it's going to be a good film. That's it. That's my only reaction to this. Like, you can't say anything because we have no details. But if they bring back certain characters, especially those who have been thrust back into the limelight.
So they asked John Rhys Davies to come back for this, and he said no because they wanted him in the wedding scene, and he says it's disrespectful to his character if he only had a cameo. Which I think that's his post Lord of the Rings ego talking, if I'm being honest.
But if we bring back Short Round, especially grown up, oh, brilliant, fantastic. Especially because he does stunt work now. It would fit so well. Like, please, just bring him back. That's my only opinion on the next film. Like, until we get any more details, which, I mean, we might have at this point during the video with timings and stuff like that. Yeah, bring him back.
Let me see a trailer. Let me see if it excites me, because at the moment it just doesn't. It's right now I've got literally zero interest in seeing another Indy movie, and that's unless it's one of the originals, which I really do go back and love. But for me it just doesn't hold any excitement at the moment. But a trailer could change that. A really well put together trailer will probably make me go, oh, okay, I'm a little bit more interested. Don't get us wrong, this will come out. I will go to the cinema to see it because I just will. It's an Indiana Jones movie, and I'm going to have to see it because I'll need to talk to someone about it. So I'll see it. But yeah, right now I've got so little interest in the actual ongoing film.
No, and that's completely understandable. As I said, hopefully that trailer is out. And last thing, I mean, we've kind of done a final thoughts, but final not. But very quickly, do we have a favorite scene from everyone? I mean, you've both mentioned about the opening. I'm going to probably join in. I think the opening 10... I mean, we've had the Elvis film this year, so Hound Dog's been in my head quite a bit, I'm not going to lie. But I think it's the best scene, the opening set piece. Because also, you've wanted to have gone to the warehouse. Like, that's the enigma is... Could you do something there? And I love the build up to, yes, it's stupid having the metal getting, that's the only magnet there. But the logic of exploring that, I think that felt like Indiana Jones. That even meeting Mac for the first time felt about right, that we're going to get a double crossing British guy. And Ray Winston is someone that fits into this world. But I just feel that they lose it too quickly. And also it's so obvious it's going to be an alien from the start too. It's not like a big revelation.
I mean, it's called Warehouse 51. You think, oh, is it Area 51? And then it's like, oh, it actually was. That's stupid.
Yeah, so that'd be my favorite scene. Any others? Bring them up now because we are going to round off and start to hype up what comes next.
I mean, I quite like the scene where I saw Indy as a teacher again, because it felt like it was another like, oh yeah, I forgot he's actually a teacher. And they actually do like come back with the one joke that probably lands in this entire film, which is, you said you were a teacher, and he goes part-time. I know that was in the trailers, but I think that joke landed. I think that's fine.
Terrible Wilhelm scream. Sorry, it's just brought back
so many terrible Wilhelms.
The motorbike one, like the his face
one.
Moved.
I think, was that one of the drinking rules we had? I can't remember.
I think so. I hadn't seen it. I was like, what Wilhelm screams this? Didn't miss it when it happened.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go back to that first opening scene in the warehouse. I think it's that for me is Indiana Jones. It works really well. It is having a great time. We know the location. You say the hint of the art that I said earlier. It's just really well played. And then for me, it drops downhill. And and if I'm going to go anywhere else, I do like the moment that Shia picks up that hat. Picks up that hat at the end. It should have been taken, and then they should have faded to black then and not had him stand awkwardly while 40 people walk past him. But yeah, so there's that. I do like that more. He picks up the hat, but other than that, it's between those two moments, the beginning and the end, it's just a big mess in the middle.
It's a blur.
Yeah, it is. And I'm just going to get to my final thoughts. Approach this from the Steven Spielberg retrospective. This is one of course, his other films. Approaching it as Indiana Jones film. It's probably lower ranked as an Indiana Jones fan than it is as a Spielberg fan, if that analogy will make any sense to anyone. But again, it's such a tonal whiplash to go from Munich to War of the Worlds, Minority Report, even The Terminal. It's boom, Indiana Jones, and just something never feels right. I think it is. I feel it's a favor, and I also feel it's a Spielberg, like, I don't want anyone else to do an Indiana Jones film too. That's how I also felt he probably was in 08. He didn't want to be the one not to do it with George. And yeah, I'm going to, will I see it before next year? That's my only question. Will I see it before next year when the new one's out? I don't know.
No. Unless we're drinking again, no.
And that's it. It's sad because, I don't, certainly with me, I'm far more lenient on films than most. I think I've said that a lot in the past. And also, let's be I say no one actively goes out to dislike films. No. People do, which is just psychotic and weird. But it is sad when you've got this incredible legacy from one of the most powerful director-producer combos in history, probably the best director-composer duo, and for the perfect series to reunite them all together, and it didn't work out. The best positive I would take from that is that I feel they will not allow it to go wrong for the next film. But of course, we'll have to wait to find out.
Yeah, I'm completely agreeing with you there. Like, it's a misstep. It's one of those things where kind of they tried something, it didn't work, and the fact they've got another film coming out, they're going to move on from that. But it is a shame, kind of. I still remember that disappointment from the cinema, but you get that sometimes with film franchises and stuff like that, and you can only just hope for the next thing's going to be better. If you're truly a fan of that kind of style of film, that franchise or anything like that, you can't be upset when one thing goes wrong. You just got to be happy that you've got the right stuff in the first place, and there might be more good things to come. Like, you can't base your opinions based off, just, one film was bad, or having not even seen something, which is a discussion for other franchises. But with this one, it didn't land. It doesn't mean that, the entire franchise is tarnished. What it means is that, like George said, you've got room to improve for the future, and you can always take that on board, and there will be stuff that you will like from it. I mean, we don't like this, or at least I don't like this film, but we've talked about things that we do like from the film. It's, there's positives from it. So that's where I stand with this film. It's not a good film in my books. It's not a good Spielberg film. It's a misstep. We move on to better things.
It just shows that sometimes you can have all the pieces in play and have the perfect pieces to come to this movie, and have your Spielberg, your Lucas, your Ford, and you're going to make this new Indiana Jones movie, which you've got an excellent franchise behind it. And sometimes you just have a swing and a miss, and it just does not come out the way you probably intended it to at the start. I'm a lover of some movies that people absolutely hate, thinking this is a terrible movie. How do you watch it? I'll find enjoyment in most movies. I like some bad movies way more than I should. And this just didn't land for me at all. It just doesn't work for what they seem they wanted to be doing. There seems to be clashing ideals and ideas that didn't meet the expectations. But you know what? Hey, we're here. We're going to keep talking about Indiana Jones, and I'm sure, like George said, it alluded to that. They're probably looking at this next movie as the last hurrah, and how do we go out on a bumper note for people to then go, oh, remember that last Indiana Jones movie? Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, and that's it. And we will find out. And as I said, we are recording this in the past, so maybe we find out D23. Maybe we'll find out Star Wars Celebration next year, which we're all going to be going to, which is going to be very exciting indeed. Because I'm sure Harrison Ford will be there. You better be there, Harrison, because you got a 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi to also help promote. But that being said, that is going to do it for our review for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Please do comment your thoughts below if you have not already. We want to hear them. And hey, if you think I've been too harsh this film, comment it. Let us know the stuff you like about this film, what's worked for you. Because to me, the more interesting thing about doing these kind of stuff is not when people disagree with you, but I dislike Rise of Skywalker. Sorry to bring it up again. But I'm always curious to hear from people that do like it, because it's really interesting. Not raising in terms of how dare you, but I like seeing people's approach to films. And I'm the same as you, Dave. You mentioned I enjoy a lot of terrible films. I love Die Another Day. Die Another Day is better than, if I'm being blunt, about a fair few Connery and Roger Moore films in the Bond era. But that's just my opinion, because we're all entitled to them if you've actually seen it. So that is that. And what is coming next on not Indiana Jones Retrospective? No, the Steven Spielberg Retrospective. Up next is The Adventures of Tintin, dropping Tuesday, the 27th of September. And as we've said, we are batch recording these. We are preparing for the London Film Festival. There's a lot of stuff happening on the channel at the moment. Bond Anniversary is going to be with us over the next 2 weeks as well. So there's a lot of things we'll be building up for, a lot of other stuff as well. And looking forwards, aside from Tintin, as I've kind of said, there are a lot of films coming up. We've got Warhorse on the 4th of October. We've got Lincoln on the 11th of October. I mean, I'm going to be, but now I've just read them out like Warhorse, Lincoln, and Bridge Players. That is 3 very good films in a row. It's
big hitters coming back in again, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's kind of like, Tintin I've never seen. I'm very curious for, because I love that behind the scenes stuff. I love the motion capture technology, and that feels, I think that's him and Peter Jackson combined into one. But some of those are just, again, we're heading into another decade of the Spielberg stuff. We've started in the 70s. Now we're going to be in the 10s. And the quality just doesn't drop as far as I'm concerned. So that's going to be very exciting. But before we get into any socials, we're going to bring Dave's stuff back up. Dave, you've been tweeting a lot recently, still doing your Oscars watch along. You got to watch this film for us, which I greatly appreciated. What else have you got going on? I know you're going to be with us on the Andor reviews, though.
Yes,
I'm not making you. But you're making yourself.
No, I'm taking a day off work for the Andor so I can watch the first 3 episodes in all their glory in movie style. So yeah, mainly you can probably catch me again here soon because I do have a YouTube channel, but it's not very active. And yeah, if you want to follow me, you can on my Twitter at @TheDaveBryan.
Definitely, everybody follow Dave on there. And Tayte, where can the people find out? I mean, next up is Andor tomorrow.
Yes,
that'll be a spoiler discussion. But when we've got other things, because by this point in time we would have had Cobra Kai. It's so weird planning ahead. There's a lot of films coming out. I mentioned Darren Darling. The best way to find out about our videos is the social medias. And where can they find us?
Yes, follow us on all the social medias. We do have spontaneous moments where we just splash out videos of things that we've watched and stuff like that. So please, learn from this information and go and follow us on all these things. Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy. Facebook and Letterboxd, just type in Cinema Savvy, and go onto Redbubble if you would like to support the channel. Pick up a t-shirt. There are so many different designs, or a cap, or a pillow, or a jumper, which you may have seen magically disappear from myself during this review. Anything you want.
Definitely, so everybody please do them. And as we've said, there's lots of happening on the channel. We're heading into one of the busiest times of the year for us, and this series is still ongoing. So I want to say thank you all to everyone that's not just tuned in tonight, that's watched this, that's watched our other Indiana Jones videos, that's been following this series and a lot of our other stuff. We hope you've enjoyed it. And it's going to be exciting to get you all on the next one. So thank you all again for watching. Take care, and we'll see you then.